That'd be amazing.
You know?
Alright, we are live. I'm going to turn the cameras on in just a second.
Okay. I wouldn't learn how to play guitar.
Play again.
No. Well, piano.
Yeah.
Oh, you can't afford it. So no where the psychology.
Hey, who knew?
Who knew?
Alrighty, good evening, everyone. My name is Daniel Barrett. I'm an event facilitator here at McClelland Robertson Booksellers. And before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are on Treaty 1 territory, and that the land on which we are gathered is the home territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Aninawak, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. In addition, McClelland Robertson Booksellers itself is located on the land once occupied by the Métis community of Roostertown. Many thanks for joining us here tonight for the launch of 52 Ways to Reconcile, How to Walk with Indigenous Peoples on the Path to Healing by David A. Robertson. And many thanks to McClelland Stewart for publishing this book and partnering on us with this event. David and Greg will be out in just a moment to speak, and after their conversation, there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions.
Here we are.
Here we go. When the time does come for questions, feel free to raise your hand nice and high for me to see, and then I'll come by with this wireless microphone just to ensure that you're heard on our live stream tonight. And I will be back at the end of the presentation just to review signing procedure. But for now, I do have the pleasure of introducing tonight's guests. Your host, Greg Mackling, now co-hosts the morning show with Brett McGarry on 680 CJOB. After several years of hosting a variety of programs and being the fill-in guy for every show on the clock. He also hosts the Blue Bombers halftime show during home games and is co-host of the Blue Bombers podcast with Hall of Famer Doug Brown. Greg is comfortable sharing stories from his personal journey through life. He freely shares his battle with brain injury and depression and has become an outspoken advocate for mental wellness. As a proud husband and father of twin boys, his family is the source of his inspiration, pride, and quite often fodder for discussion and perspective on air. A fierce defender of all things Manitoban, Greg is active in a variety of special projects and events, including the role of spokesperson for the St. Boniface Hospital Foundation Lottery. And our author this evening, David A. Robertson, is the author of numerous books for young readers, including Governor General's Literary Award winners, On the Trapline and When We Were Alone. The Barren Grounds, book 1 of the Misawa Saga series, was a Kirkus, NPR, and Quill and Choir Best Middle Grade Book of 2020, as well as the US BBY and Texas Lone Star selection. Winner of the Writers' Union of Canada's Freedom to Read Award, as well as the 2021 Globe and Mail Children's Storyteller of the Year recipient, Dave is a member of Norway House Cree Nation and currently lives in Winnipeg. Please join me in welcoming David A. Robertson.
Are we on? Is this thing on?
Hello?
Daniel has to.
Oh, there we go. Hey,
Not used to doing this with you, but
I
all
know.
these people watching.
No, are you?
It's good to see you, brother.
See you too.
Congratulations on
Oh, that's
this.
what you look like.
This is what I look like. Yes.
You have a TV face too.
Well, some would say yes, most would say no. They forced it a little bit during the St. Boniface Hospital lottery. So yeah, you probably don't even recognize me because of the makeup that they put on me. Anyway, enough about me. This is about you tonight. And it's great. Thank you for everyone for coming out. It's such a perfect spring evening. It's almost like a perfect summer night. And so grateful to see you all here. David has become one of my favorite people on the planet. I don't make a secret about that. Quite by happenstance, we've, I think, become quite connected about a variety of different things over the years. His wife Jill makes the best sugar cookies. So if you ever get a chance to get Christmas cookies from the Robertsons, do not turn them down. But I'm honored to be here tonight, probably as much for your last book as this one, if that's okay, because that's, you know, we have lots of things in common. Parents, parenting, probably the largest one, and right over there, Noteworthy Psychology, David A. Robertson, all the little monsters, and your life and dealing with anxiety. And you've had a lot of very brave projects. I mean, I think all your projects are brave because you're sharing so much of yourself. How do you get comfortable doing that?
I think as a writer, you kind of have to put yourself into the character, into the story as much as you can. And so whether it's fiction or nonfiction, it's almost a requirement. You know, I think what people connect to with characters and stories is emotional honesty and vulnerability and relatability. And so, you know, when I'm writing nonfiction, like All Little Monsters or 52 Ways or Blackwater, you have to be willing to go to places that are uncomfortable because you recognize the value in the story and you want to do the story justice, and you want people to connect with as much as they can because you believe in what you're saying. And so, yeah, I think so. In my career, I've tackled a lot of difficult subjects, but in doing so, you just have to make sure that you are putting everything you can into it. While I'm not good at this part, but making sure that you're also looking after yourself at the same time, because you are giving a lot of what you have to give.
Are you Metallica? Like, have you sold out? Who do you write for? Do you write for yourself? Are you constantly, how often, maybe I'll rephrase it, how often are you thinking about how people are gonna take this? Or do you give a dang?
I don't worry about that, no, I don't worry about that. I mean, you can't really write worrying about what people are gonna think about what you put out. If you really believe in it, you'll find your readership. So no, I don't think a lot about that at all. But I do think that my books are for two sets of people. One of them is definitely for myself. I think there's definitely a catharsis in writing the stuff that I write. I wouldn't write it if I didn't believe in it. And working through a lot of the things that I've written about has been helpful for me. You know, especially All Little Monsters it was a healing journey for me. You know, to be able to revisit a lot of things in my life that I've been through and it helped me to reframe a lot of my life in kind of remembering and recontextualizing and understanding things better. I think this book is pretty similar in that way, you know, thinking about reconciliation, taking stock of everything that I've learned about it, you know, in the 16 years I've been doing this, and the people that I've been able to meet, the conversations I've been able to have, and how that shaped my understanding of what it is. That was helpful for me in writing this book, because it kind of was able to take stock of what I've learned. But it's also for everybody, you know, it's also for people, you know, with mental health struggles, with little monsters, that I felt like that mirroring was very important. And with this book, I really do feel that there is a hesitancy or a fear in some ways with reconciliation. I feel like there's a feeling that we'll get it wrong or that we'll make mistakes. I heard that a lot, especially in the education area. Teachers are the best people I know, but they also don't want to do things incorrectly. You know, and I think that what we have to do is to give ourselves, first of all, grace, and understand as well that this is a new process, really. I mean, we've only been doing it actively for probably 10, 15 years or so. And in the process, there's going to be mistakes that we make. And that's how we improve. That's how we learn and get better. And so we have to make mistakes. And so you have to be bold enough to be able to make mistakes to get better at what we do. And it's all for the benefit of the kids. That's change makers. And so I think every book I write is a bit for me and a bit for the readers I write for.
Well, the operative word for me, and obviously reconcile, is, as I said to you on the air this morning, one of the words of the decade in our country for sure. But the word healing, I like that word, not better, but I love that word so much. Why is that word so important in this title? Well,
it's accurate. I think first of all, reconciliation is not accurate. It's not an accurate term for what we're trying to do. There's two streams. There's the Indigenous stream, there's the non-Indigenous stream. In the Indigenous stream, that's where reconciliation exists, within that stream. Because reconciliation is a process of healing a broken relationship. That's what it is. And so if you look at the history of Canada, we never had a relationship to begin with. Never had a good relationship to begin with. So there's nothing to heal from. There's nothing to return to. There's nothing we're trying to heal. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to build a relationship. So that's not really what I would think reconciliation is. When I think about reconciliation, that broad scope, I think of it as a community building effort, you know, and a conversation with each other as a community. With the Indigenous communities in Turtle Island, we do have healing to do. We have healing work to do. I remember I was in Norrie House doing work in at the Halbody Osborne Education Resource Center and Jack River School. This is right around when Tina Fontaine's trial ended, and right around as well when Colton Bushy's trial ended. A lot of hurt there, a lot of trauma. And I was doing work in Jack River School that day. And I remember having lunch with the principal of Jack River School. She's since passed on, but she told me we can't heal brokenness with brokenness. And so what that said to me and what I've carried from that day is the whole concept of that we have to heal ourselves, you know, as Indigenous people. There's a lot of healing we have to do. And we have to heal within our families. We have to heal within our communities. We have to have the space to be able to do that work. And so that's reconciliation, you know, because we did have a good relationship. Things were good with us, like we weren't doing too bad. And then until colonialism, and then we were, you know, then it kind of wrecked us a little bit. We're finding our way back, but that's a long process. So I don't love that word, but healing I love. And you know, healing is what we're doing. You know, we're healing. We're every year we're doing a little better. We're reclaiming our languages. We're working at language revitalization. We are getting reconnected to our culture. We're becoming reconnected to the land. I remember going to the Chaplain with my father. We were fishing on the water near Blackwater, and I was not catching any fish because I suck at it. And the elder who brought us out there was catching everything, and my dad was catching a couple fish. But then there was we heard all these cheers, and I looked at in the distance. There was these kids on a boat fishing. I asked the elder, "What are they doing out here this far?" And he said, "They're in school." And so they were reconnecting. They were learning on the land, and so that all of that is healing. That's healing. That's important. I also think, though, like in the broader scope of things, we all have healing to do, you know, and whether it is a product of colonial country, I think we're all impacted by it, whether we recognize it or not. We have a little bit of healing to do, but there is a healing that we need to do in our relationships, in that broad sense too. And because of the history of this country is a history of manufactured preconceptions and how we see each other. How I see you and how you see me. My father used to talk about the process of reconciliation as being one of conversation where we sit down with each other and we're able to push through those preconceptions and to see each other as we are, which are humans, see each other as human beings. And we connect at that level. And then we work to understand and learn from each other and to come to a respect for each other from that learning. That's healing too. So I love that word healing.
I do too. And so the stories are important. Your story is important to me and hopefully mine to you. And then that's where we gain understanding. But you mentioned language. I was up in, I'm going to say Cross Lake.
Yeah, I would say it too.
Bonavie is I think as close as I'm going to get to saying it correctly. But how important is it now that we see Cree, Ojibwe, words for these First Nations versus the names that they were given? Why is that important? Or is it important that these names are now being presented and being used? I've found it very connecting to learn about the history and to hopefully learn over the years to say it exactly correctly.
Yeah, I think there's also two parts to that. There, one of them is us reclaiming and getting in touch with our culture through language again, you know. And so a lot of the works that I do in the books that I've put out, they always have Cree in them, and that's, you know, for me, thinking that maybe someone will read this and who's Cree and who will see their words and feel empowered by it and valued by it, seen by that, and maybe encouraged to learn their language a little bit. But you know, for me too, like when I put words in books from the Cree language, I'm learning too. And that's very important for me. The other side of it is, I think there is value in the respect that we show and learning languages from the people who we share this space with. And so I think that's important, and so the renaming of some streets like, Bishop Grandin, which is a much better name now to have for that. I also can't pronounce it very well, but I'm learning too, and so, but we're all learning. But yeah, I think that language revitalization is one of the most important movements in reconciliation, because language is the strongest tie to culture. We lose the language, we lose the culture. That's why we need to support not only the learning of language, but the ability for kids to learn in their language in school, to have schools and community that are language immersion schools. My dad was talking about this like 40 years ago, having, the analogy he used, or the comparison he used, was that, we have French immersion schools for French students. Why do we not have Cree immersion schools for Cree students?
We've had Ukrainian
right
immersion for 2 decades at least.
So what are we valuing more, right? And so we still don't have that, but we're seeing it more and more, and that's what we would call local control, where we have communities that now are getting the ability to develop their own curriculum and teach their own kids from their own worldviews in their own languages. And that's what's going to pull us out, is our movements like that.
Your family history is critically important to you. You've shared it openly with so many of us. I always make the example of all these different ways you can learn about your lineage and your family history, 23andMe, and whichever one just went out of business, went bankrupt. And the whole idea of understanding where you come from. My dad, who's here tonight, has traveled extensively, right? To go back and to get in touch with, where did we come from? Talk about what it's like to have that buried. Talk about what it's like to have that taken away and destroyed. Justice Sinclair always used famously the whole idea of destroying Indigenous culture, right? And how do you come back from that? How do you rediscover that? How do you inspire kids to be proud? My son's here as well. We were having a conversation just last night. He was doing some reading on my grandfather and my great uncle, and he was talking about the pride that he felt. How do you create that when an entire group of people in our country has been told that no, your culture does not matter?
Well, it's what you're told and what you know. Those are two things. First of all, I thought 23andMe was a clothing store. Is that not?
Forever 21.
Oh,
that's just you.
Got it. Yeah. What do I know?
Close.
Yeah, so you don't really know who you are unless you know where you've been.
Right.
So if you don't have a firm grasp of your past, you don't understand what has brought you to where you are now, then how do you have more than a fractured identity? I think that's very difficult.
Fractured identity? Is that what you said?
Yeah. And if you have a fractured identity, it's hard to feel whole, and so we talk about healing again, but what you have to do, and I think with everybody, this is not an Indigenous thing, it's cross-cultural, but one of the ways that we really get to know ourselves is to know our past. The whole spectrum of learning and knowing not only where we are, but where we need to go is understanding where we've been. And so we have to dig to do that. And, writing Blackwater was important for me because it helped me to get a really strong sense of identity through what I learned in writing that book. I learned so much about my past that I didn't know before. Not only just about my dad, but about my grandmother, and the experiences that they had growing up, the experience my dad had growing up, and so that digging in and learning about your past, what it does is helps you understand more about who you are today and what made you who you are and why you're here. And then when you have that, you have really strong footing. Really solid footing on the present. It gives you a good sense of where you need to get to develop a vision of the future for what kind of future you want to see. for yourself, but also for your community, you know. And so I think that that's the strip spectrum. That's the journey. And I think everybody needs to go on that journey, you know, no matter who you are.
Totally agree. Totally agree. The material that's available now is spectacular. And so it's not really a lot of excuse unless the material doesn't exist.
Right.
But then that journey's a little more difficult, right?
I think it's difficult. It can be difficult anyway, because I think it's hard to revisit the past, especially when there's trauma in it. But recognizing the value in doing that, in the opportunity of healing that trauma in doing that, I think is worthwhile.
So this book, 52 Ways to Reconcile, How to Walk with Indigenous Peoples on the Path to Healing, 52 ways, 52 weeks in a year. I'm guessing there's no coincidence.
Oh, really? Is that what it is?
I'm guessing there's no coincidence there. I was talking about this, you know, a little bit with somebody today, you know, a little bit of a how-to guide. And I think we need that. I think we need some guidance. So thank you for doing this.
Welcome.
Because I think you mentioned language. And sometimes the conversation with regard to healing stops very quickly with Indigenous, Aboriginal, I can't keep up. And so that's it. You know, certain generations, I won't point at anybody, but I have someone in my family who has sort of given up, not this dad, my other dad, by marriage, is someone who has kind of like at times got frustrated and used that almost as a barrier to understanding. Well, you know, if they can't figure out what they want to be called, I can't help. And that's the extent that that's the amount of effort that he might be prepared to put in. And I don't think he's alone in that.
Well, we don't want to be called that. I don't know how to answer that.
You know what I'm, but do you understand where I'm coming from?
Yeah, I think so. But
so how do I then I'll take it a step further. How do I then, it's my responsibility, I think, is to be an ally and to educate, right?
Yeah.
And to say, hey, hold on, we don't use certain words, and there are certain words you don't use by home, and this is why.
Right. Well, I think, you know, so there is either a deliberateness to the terminology that we use or not, or there is an ignorance to it. If it's deliberate, then it is more overtly offensive.
Yes.
You know, ignorance needs education.
Yes.
You know, well, both need education, but you know, like the terminology that we use, I mean, it has shifted quite often historically. But I think we need to err on is the side of specificity. You know, so like you kind of like work at the most accurate point, and then build your way out if you're not. You know, so I usually refer to myself as a Cree person. You know. Indigenous is a good umbrella term, you know, to refer to a group of people. You know, the outdated terminology of like Aboriginal and Native and Indian, I mean, that's something that we just need to educate people on if they're using that terminology, depending on how they're using it, you know, because it's something, again, that I think that if it's used in a deliberate way, a derogatory way, then that's a whole other conversation to have with someone. But maybe someone just needs to be told something. And I think that's where allyship can be helpful. You can just have a respectful conversation with someone about the right way to use, the right way to refer to someone, and the right terminology to use. But that's part of the education process. You know?
So laid back about this stuff. I love that.
Well, you have a choice. You can be upset about it, or you can, you know, you can think about the work you have to do. You know, I don't think you do really good work if you're getting angry. I don't think.
Well, you're not going to build many bridges being angry.
And my last thing I ever talked to my dad about, we were watching a football game in the basement. This was a couple days before Christmas, and in 2019. And we were watching. I think it was the Dallas Cowboys against Washington, the NFL team, and I was sitting there with my dad. My dad was like, he's always very chill, my dad, and I was sitting there and I was like just getting so worked up, And I was like, Dad, like, why are they still using that name? Why can't they change that name? Other people are changing the names. They're never gonna change it. Like, I was getting so angry about it. Dad turned to me and he said, Dave, don't you have more important things to worry about right now? That's the last thing he ever said to me. Yeah. But it was like, he was saying like, why are you getting so angry about this? Like, you have work to do,
The fact that they changed the name means more to me now, to tell you that, if you're telling that story. Okay, so let's get back to this book.
Okay.
And you make me feel comfortable to share things openly, even though there's a bunch of people here. So if I'm going somewhere that's uncomfortable, it's only because you make me feel comfortable to do that. So it's your fault.
I think
just
I'm
saying.
taking that as a compliment.
So good. That's the way it's meant to be.
Yeah.
So we've discussed for years about the power of storytelling and sharing. And why it's so important and the road to healing. And before we get into a couple of the specific, I like the lessons or guidances.
No, the book is a verb. It's an action. Every one of those things is an action.
It's an action.
Yeah.
It's a call to action.
The book is an action.
Okay.
It's all an action.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's an action.
It's intentionality and action.
Okay, so let's go through some of these because I'll get back to one of the things I wanted to ask you about here. I'm going to go what I think is the most important one first. Number 46, don't ask Indigenous people to do the work.
I'm glad that you said the actual things. I haven't memorized the numbers.
That's number 46.
Thank you, yeah. Well, so there's a great quote from Taika Waititi. He was giving a speech about the same sort of thing. The Maori people have similar histories to Indigenous people here in Canada. And he used an analogy of, you burn my house down and then you want me to help you to rebuild it. And so he was saying that, like, we didn't cause this problem. You did. Not you, but like, it was caused by someone else historically. Why are you asking us to solve it, right? It's a good question. Now, I half agree with that. I half maybe don't agree with it. Because I do think that, like, our role as Indigenous people is important. I think we do have our own role as people who need to heal. I mentioned that before, but we also need to tell our stories. And so the truth part of reconciliation comes from the stories that we tell. That's the truth. We've had our stories told by other people for a very long time, or we've had our stories ignored for a very long time. So that is part of it. The other part of it is that, wait, what was the question?
Don't ask Indigenous people to do the work.
Oh yeah, so, yeah. Now, I have always said to people that, like, I cannot tell you what to do. It doesn't mean as much if I'm prescriptive in what I think that you should be doing. At the same time, I feel like there is a lot of hesitance, or a lot of nervousness, a lot of, like, I know I should be doing something, but I don't know what I should be doing. And so I do think there is a part of this where a bit of a guidance is important. And so there are some people in the community that have a platform and ability to reach people that I feel like it is useful for us to be able to give some sort of a clear destination, or an idea of where we need to go to, and how we need to get there. So while I don't think that it's important, I don't think that we should be doing all the work. I do think that we have work to do as a community with everybody. And this book, I hope what it does, and my favorite action in this is actually getting people to think about their own actions. So, but what I think that the value of this book is it gives people a motivation to do the work, and an idea of what they can do. There's nothing prescriptive in this book. It is a book that gives ideas to take action every week. It's like a choose your own adventure. You don't have to do number 1 first. You can do number 1 30th. You know, you can flip it open and choose one randomly if you want, and see what you can do with it. But I mean, in the end, hopefully what we've done is we come to a place where we understand that change needs action. And any small action leads to, I think, or has a pretty big impact, or can have a big impact when we have intention. And so I think that's where we can be a part of the work, but I don't think we can be looked to do the work.
Number 42, read the TRC, the recommendations. What percentage of Canadians do you think have actually done that?
A very low percentage.
Yeah. Why do you think, why is that important? I mean, I think the answer is obvious.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, it's the TRC, the commission. It is the foundation of it is the truth that, you know, that we had been missing for so long. They did a lot of work to compile that and to document it for people. It is there for you, like the truth of this history of this country, as when it comes to colonialism, especially with residential school history, is housed within those documents. There is a summary of the TRC that you can read. There's also the calls to action, which you can read. The calls to action are important because I think they're also a guide, you know, and everybody has a capacity to do something. And I think just like this book, the TRC calls to action is a guide for what we can do and what we should be doing. And I've used that too, to guide a lot of my own work. You know, When We Were Alone was a book that I wrote because I read a call to action. You know, I remember in 2015, I was reading this idea that we need to start teaching young children about residential school history, and from kindergarten all the way to grade 12. I read that and I thought, first of all, we're asking teachers to do a really big job. And I don't think at that point in teacher training programs, we were preparing teachers or supporting them to be able to teach residential school history to kindergartners. That's tough to do. So for me as a writer, and you know, the only thing I really can do is write. So I thought, well, books are good resources. That's what I've been trying to do for my career. So what kind of resource can I offer to support a teacher in the work that we've given them to do by putting this action out there? So I wrote When We Were Alone. And that came from the reading of the calls to action. So anything that you read in there is potentially something that will motivate you to do something. I think, you know, this book is a bit like that too. It's anything in here is a motivation to do something. And if everybody does something, if everybody does one thing.
Don't have to do all of them.
It would be nice if you did.
Yes,
yeah,
but let's take some pressure off a little bit.
No, I mean, you can do like 30 of them. You can do 20 of them, you know, but any small thing that we do is meaningful, you know, and if everybody does something, we're going to get to where we want to get to sooner than, I mean, it's not an overnight thing, but we'll get there sooner than if nobody does anything.
This is one my son has done, and I know it's important to him, and it was a powerful experience for him, and that was to attend a powwow. He's been to multiple now.
Awesome.
Why is that? Why is that? Why is that an action?
It's a celebration.
We should do.
Well, it's changed now. Like it's changed. What it does now is shifted. You know, historically, powwows were put on to you know, to celebrate the coming together of two tribes. Or to celebrate a successful hunt. Like that's what powwows were put on for. And then they were outlawed. You know, the Indian Act outlawed powwows, and they came back in the 1950s. Now what they are, though, is a celebration of culture. They're a celebration expression of culture. And they're for everybody, you know, and so.
People hear that. And it's said all the time, all are welcome.
Yeah.
That's 100% accurate. Yes?
100%. Yeah. 100%. Yeah, for sure. I mean, we want you to come to powwows. You know, they're these beautiful expressions of culture. Dances are meaningful. The regalia is meaningful. You know, there are, you know, everywhere you look, there's something to learn. And if you're not sure what to do, you can always just ask or watch what other people are doing. But it is a way to immerse yourself into a culture of people that I think is something that we've misunderstood for a long time, but there's a lot of beauty there that we can connect to. And I think come to a better understanding of, like the jingle dress dance is a dance that there's a lot of history to that dance and there's a lot of meaning to that dance. And watching it happen is when you understand it, it becomes way much more meaningful and profoundly beautiful.
What does it mean to you to see someone like Kevin Chief, a leader in our community, friend of mine, doing the Red River jig and his kids are jigging, and then to see our premier dancing participating in regalia? Well, what message do you get from that?
Well, I mean, like Wob is a traditionalist, he was that first before he was a provincial leader.
Yeah.
He's an incredibly smart man, but he also, lived the life of an Anishinaabe person. He was a drummer and a singer, and he's a dancer, and he, it shows us what's possible, and it also shows us that we never had to do it the way that we did it, because there is historically this history of us having this belief that we needed to change who we were to be successful in society. We see time and time again that that's not at all the case, where we walk both lines and we do it very well. And Wob is a great example. He is someone who lives his culture, but he's also a great leader in this province for everybody. He sets an example for a lot of people on how to not only be a good leader, but how to be a really decent human being, which I think that he is.
I think he's being recognized as a great leader countrywide.
Well, yeah, I mean,
he's capturing a lot of attention, and I don't think it's for attention's sake.
No, I don't think so either. I think he just knows what he's doing, and I think he's quite good at it.
I have to be careful what I say. I have my views, but I agree. Understand your privilege, number 51. That's probably not for you.
It might be.
Yeah? Why?
Sure.
Well, how could it be for you?
Well, I mean,
sorry, here we go again. I'm making assumptions I shouldn't be making.
No, but I think that, for me, I grew up in a really good neighborhood, in Winnipeg, and my mom raised me and my brothers really well, and we benefited from living in the place that we lived in, and so I had privilege growing up, which I understand and I feel grateful for. But I lived in a different situation than a lot of people live in. Part of understanding our privilege is understanding that other people do not have privilege, and understanding that people do not have privilege. I think it helps to reframe who we are as a community, who we want to be, and the equity that we want to achieve. People in community, right in this province, they don't have access to things that we have access to. We have access to schools. We have access to middle years and high schools. We have access to adequate health care. We have access to all these things that we take for granted. In community, in remote communities especially, if you're sick, you're in big trouble, because you have to be maybe airlifted down to the city. You might have to leave home still to go to high school, because it's not available in the community that you live in. In a lot of parts of this province or in this country, no matter what the previous prime minister promised and prime ministers before him has promised, we still don't have communities with clean drinking water, And that is we have communities in this country that live in third world conditions, and we're a first world country, and we should be really concerned about that, And we are very quick, and we're very good at charitable initiatives globally. But at the same time, maybe a couple 100 kilometers away from here or from other places in the country, we have people who don't have to boil their water before they drink it, And how does that make sense?
Well, how did it make sense for, was it 40 years? That Shoal Lake 40, that lived on the shore of where we get our drinking water, had to boil theirs. It's mind-boggling, some of the
Yeah.
dichotomy in our society, right? And so,
But I think what we need to do is to understand our privilege and how we can use our privilege to impact others positively. That's what I think we have to do.
allyship and being on side, and we hear terms like woke agenda and all these different narratives about, you know, as soon as you speak out on one thing, then you're a part of something else. And so how much are people, even those who would like to speak out, being challenged on that front? You mentioned TRC, you mentioned residential schools. We've got I work in an environment where anytime we have a conversation about residential schools, our text line is filled with people who deny anything and call down and question the very conversation that we've had that is based in fact. How do we overcome that?
Wow, there's always people out there who are not gonna, you know, sometimes the loudest voices come from the smallest people. So I think you need to focus on the people that really care, are really interested in creating change, are really knowledgeable and understand the situation that we're in as a country. I try not to worry too much about the people who are going to, you know, shout from the rooftop so they don't think that, you know, 15,000 children died at residential schools. That's not who we need to focus on. They're gonna eventually not be here anymore. And well, if they're not, you know, and the kids are, and they're gonna be in leadership positions. I have the privilege of being able to go across Canada and speak to kids at all ages, all over this country. And that's where I see hope, you know, and every single school I go to, having conversations with kids, knowing that every single kid now, every single grade is learning about residential schools, and learning about more than just that, and doing it through literature, doing it through curriculum, doing it through like teachers who care, librarians who are stocking books that matter. That's where the hope is. I don't worry about people who are going to be, you know, residential school denialists. There's not many of them anyway. You know, I focus on the positive. I focus on the people who matter. I don't care about what is it, John Kay. I don't even think about him at once. That's the first time I thought about him in probably like a couple of years.
There you go, I ruined it for you again. Let's finish on the youth, because if you ever want to be, we hear all the time, oh, young people, all they care about is their phones and video games, and they're disconnected from this, they're disconnected from that. There are many young people in the audience who've taken time to be here tonight. But I've had the privilege to attend several high school graduations over the last few years, and I am blown away by the plans that young people have coming out of high school. Because now there's a little biography that takes place when the kids graduate and they're coming up to get their diploma. So-and-so is attending this university on this scholarship. It tends to study this, that, or this.
Oh, really?
And it's the greatest thing ever.
I didn't even have like a song lyric quoted in my yearbook.
There you go. Nor did I. I graduated with about 400 people. Get them through as fast as you can. So if you ever want to be inspired, honest to goodness, go to a high school graduation. Our youth is far more equipped for the future than I think most of us are giving them credit for.
Yeah, they are. Because, I mean, we have great teachers who are doing the work. Teachers, librarians, teachers, educators, administrators in the education system that's the hardest job that we have in this country, and the most important job that we have in this country, because they are in the front lines of impacting the people who matter most, and that's our kids. The whole goal that we should have in this country, and what I think, is that, and this is why I write mostly for kids, is to make sure that we're preparing youth to be better leaders than we have today, to do better work than has been done in the past. That's the focus that we need to have in this country, is preparing kids. That's why I don't worry so much about older people who have outdated beliefs. I mean, I think about it, but I worry most about the kids. And I think about how we're preparing them. And I feel really hopeful about the direction that we're headed in, because they are going to be the ones who create change if we prepare them properly. And I think that we're doing that. And it's really hopeful. I think most of the kids here probably because of the barren grounds, but you know, but like, yeah, I think like that should be our focus for everybody. Whether you're a parent or a teacher, you have a kid, how are we preparing those kids to be better leaders? That's the focus we should have.
Questions? Questions from the audience?
So I am a teacher and I'm really excited to use this in my classroom. I know there's a trend now of authors making annotated or child-friendly versions of their books. Have you ever considered putting out because this is a little dense for my 4 or 5s to get through, but would you ever consider putting out a child-friendly version of the book?
We've thought about it. Yeah, I think that it's something that we've been in discussions about, how would we would do that. I do think this book is something that could be used for grade 7, 8 and up. But I think that something for younger kids, maybe in picture book format or maybe in chapter book format, might be pretty useful. I feel the same way about All Little Monsters. I think it's something that, a picture book about that. I worked with an illustrator, Holly Haddam, and she did a proof of concept that's about 5 pages long about, Little Monsters as a picture book. A lot of kids living with anxiety today, and so some sort of useful guide for them that at least makes them feel seen and shows them some things that they can do to ask for help or to get through periods of anxiety, I think is really important. So I think there is value in looking at how we can adapt books like this for kids, and we're thinking about it. I just haven't figured out how exactly to do it yet, but it's definitely on my mind.
Thank you very much. And thank you for making our kids feel seen and wanted through your books and doing really incredible work. So thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, hi. Couple of things. I participate in a TR circle, we call it, in southern Manitoba. And so we're working, one of the things we're doing right now is trying to do something around the red dress. What is it they call that? Red dress awareness, I guess it is. And so I've been putting posters up at post office and different places. And I go around a couple of days later and the posters are gone. And so it makes me, kind of, I don't know, angry, I guess, or whose business is it to take these posters down? But anyway, that's just something that's happening. Our event is on Saturday this week, so we'll see how that goes. The other thing is, as part of this TR circle, we meet once a month and we're trying to do some things to bring awareness in the community. And one of my questions, well, when we started this TR circle was, what are people afraid of? How do we address, what are people afraid of? In the farming area, about the land, I think, and what exactly does that mean? And one of the other things I was trying to figure out was, how do we bring Indigenous people and settlers, I guess you'd say, together in a common event? Like right now we're hosting bingos and that seems to be okay. People will come together and, they're not socializing with each other, but they're together in this, certain location. And I'm thinking, what are some other things like that we could do, to bring people together that, I don't know, something like that.
You asked me what events you could do to bring people together?
Yeah, other events besides bingo.
Bingo's pretty good. A lot of bingo happening in our communities,
I'm addicted to the Kidsman bingo, right? Jackpot bingo myself.
Yeah. I mean, I go to Norrie House and it's like, they have bingo every night on the radio. Yeah, it's a big thing, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, I don't really know a good answer for that one. I do think that, these gatherings are a good way to build community. I don't know what that might be though.
Well, did we have a better example than for the last 6, 7, wasn't that long, felt that long.
Oh,
The last month with the Jets, and we wanted it to be 6, 7, 8 weeks long.
Yeah.
But was there anything better for the community, for young people to come together with, old guys like me and everyone in between and all creeds, colors, like it was, that to me is the most special part of the Jets doing what they do with those street parties, is the ability for people who can't typically afford to get inside the building, but they can be right there and they can be together. There's something special about that.
Yeah, I think that, there are opportunities to gather. I think part of it, I believe in action, the book is to just show up to these things, so I don't think I had an idea of, is it in there?
How about host a movie night?
I mean, you could do that too.
That's the first one.
Is it? Oh, that's good.
Do you want me to read the rest of them too?
I don't know, but I think like showing up. So unfortunately, in this country, something else is going to happen that will lead to us having to gather together. Whether it is to memorialize something or whether it is to protest against something. So I think that when you have opportunities like that to show up and be a part of the community, I think that's important. I think it's important to listen and to learn when you go to those gatherings. But I've been to enough to know that everybody comes to those, no matter where you come from, no matter your culture, no matter your gender. It's the whole community out there. So I think when that happens, to show up is an important opportunity, not only to come together for a cause, but to be a part of a community. I think is a really meaningful thing to do. And bingo.
Anyone else here? And bingo. The very back.
My favorite question to ask is, which books have you been reading lately accessible lately? And how did you get Sheila Rogers to write the intro?
How did you get Sheila Rogers to write the intro for your book?
Sheila's my best friend. That's why probably. I just said, Sheila, I'll buy breakfast if you Actually, probably how it happened. What was the first part? What books have I been reading?
Which books have you been obsessed with, that you're most interested in?
What's the book that you next want to read?
What I want to read. What I've lined up. I actually have mother-daughter kind of thing. I'm rereading right now Swing Low, Miriam Taves. And also Georgia Taves' new book. And so, but I don't have a lot of time to read for pleasure. Another part of my job is I'm an editorial director for a publishing imprint from Penguin Random House Canada. And a lot of my reading is submissions to that imprint to decide what I want to publish, what I can't. So a lot of my reading time is submission reading. So the best book I read recently is James by Percival Everett.
His name was James.
Oh, different James. But James is a good name. Yeah, James by Percival Everett is probably one of the best books I've read in the last few years. So that one I would say is definitely, and I would always say my favorite book of all time is 9 Stories by J.D. Salinger. So I would read that one as well.
How about take a Miriam Taves book and read it in the Miriam Taves garden at Kings Park?
Wow, this feels like, what did they call that? Like meta? Is that what it is? I don't know. You could do that.
Research.
You could just read it on your couch or
Fantastic.
in your backyard.
Anybody else? Oh, here we go.
Yeah, hi David.
Hi.
Do you work with the province on the provincial governments, like on the curriculum? I mean, on the when I think about decolonization and reconciliation, healing, and indigenization, what comes to mind is the you talk about how welcoming, come to a powwow and I think it would be so good to see more and more indigenization into our schools. I'm part of a PS, like a post-secondary, and we're blowing up
our collective agreement right now, and we're working with an elder on decolonizing and seeing the racist components of a collective agreement. But on the flip side of that is we're looking at the indigenization of it. And as a non-Indigenous person, I don't think I can, I can help with decolonization and I can help with reconciliation, but I cannot indigenize any, that's not me. So there's that side. But today when we were talking to knowledge keepers, one of them who was Cree, she said, we were talking about pronouns and how you have inclusive language, right? And she said, as a Cree person, and I know this, I'm from the North, and she said, there's no he, she, it's more spirit. And she said, so you asking me to put the she behind my name, if that's who I, she said, you're telling me you're using colonization that I have to interpret. And that is a work. So it was just a really, I don't know, there's just a piece about indigenizing, breaking down the barriers of colonization, but also the flip is that beautiful part of bringing in indigenization. And can you speak a little bit about that, in terms of where you think we are with the public school and where we're going?
Well, yes. I feel like I've seen it enough to know that it's happening. I do think that it is a really a long-term process. It's a generational process, really. It's going to take a long time. It is a matter of breaking down barriers, breaking down walls, and building them back up again. So I'm not smart enough probably to answer that properly, but I'm lucky enough to be in enough schools every week to know that I see it happening bit by bit. Whether it is the MBE course in Ontario, that now is a requirement to read Indigenous literature in grade 11. That's a little step. Or going to school and seeing that the walls are lined with pictures from a book that I wrote, and that is really cool to see that. But the kids are also learning about land preservation, land stewardship, environmental protection, climate change, so those things, and land-based learning. And so I feel like the important things that I see are going to be usually land connected, land-based education, and Indigenous ways of knowing and being is really important. And so other than that, I don't know if I have much of an intelligent answer. I do know that I've seen a lot of great educators who are incorporating a lot of Indigenous thought into their schools, into the curriculum. But it is a matter of, I think, breaking down and building up, and that, I think that's a really difficult thing to do. But I think it's patience with the process. And I've seen a lot happen over the last decade to know that we're heading in the right direction. But I don't know if I have a smarter answer than that to give you. I think a lot of my answers are going to be based in books. Yeah, not just my books either.
Hi, my name is James. I would not necessarily respond to the lady's question that just has spoken a few minutes ago, but as an outsider, I'm an Irish person that's been here for a few years, and I grew up with a different kind of, I suppose, divide, colonialism, etc. And I would never have understood it as much as I do now until I came to Winnipeg, until I came to Canada. And in saying that, I completely and utterly understand from so many different parts of the community how people feel and how people are angry, and there's so many dynamics involved. But at the same time, it's time to move on, and it's time to everybody has to grow up. I came here, I had no idea. We played, how racist can you be? When we were kids, we played cowboys and Indians, knowing no better. We watched on TV, John Wayne and whatever he wanted to be, cowboys and Indians. I lived in New York for a while, but until I came to Winnipeg, I never realized the situation of the Indigenous people of Canada for instance, we had a different situation in Ireland, but until you see the situation and I suppose the poverty and the legacy that's involved, you never understand. So I understand every point of view, but
James, you have a question?
oh, sorry, there's a question about. The question is, oh, I apologize. So what do you think is the future for Canada? What's the legacy? What is, without economics and without all that, what is the actual legacy?
Well, legacy is what we make it. We haven't, I don't think we've developed our legacy yet. That's what the work is. Figure out what we want our legacy to be. We have the legacy that we have now and what we've have in the past, but we have a lot of work to do yet, and we have an opportunity to change what that legacy is. And I think everybody needs to develop a clear vision of what we can be as a country, as opposed to what we are now.
All right, thank you. We'll move along to the signing portion of the evening today. So feel free to approach the signing table here to my right, have a book signed, and you may do so before visiting the cash desk as well. We're going to give one big thank you again to everybody here and online for joining us, to McClelland Stewart, to Greg Mackling for hosting, and of course, to David E. Robertson. Thank you so much.